This is Corinne.
And this is Ayani.
And you're listening to Sex, Love, Literature, a pop culture podcast where we take a semi-scholarly look at why
and how
the sex stuff in media matters.
This episode, we're joined by Frannie and Sophie, hosts of the Girls Like Us podcast, to chat Casey McQuiston's runaway hit novel, Red, White, and Royal Blue.
The four of us talk queer romance, political fantasy, and what it is that makes so many English majors want to start a podcast.
If you're enjoying our English major podcast, make sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Sex Love Lit.
And maybe even share us with a friend or two.
So with that, let's start the show. Hello, everybody. Welcome to yet another episode of Sex, Love, Literature. We are very, very excited to have y'all with us today. So, if you've been following our Instagram, you'll see that this episode we are going to be talking about the book Red, White, and Royal Blue. But this is also a special episode because we have some people hanging out with us in the pod today. So, folks, I would like to introduce you to Sophie and Frannie from Girls Like Us.
Hey! Thank you guys for having us on. We're very excited.
Dream. Yeah.
The American dream, if you will.
Don't even.
Yeah.
I literally am not ready for that discussion. I'm not there yet. We're going to have to warm up to that one.
Yeah, that one will be happening, though. It is definitely in the notes for today.
Yeah, my question, briefly, maybe about this book would be, did the author not know that Hamilton existed when they wrote it?
I feel like the author definitely was, in conversation with Hamilton fandom when she wrote it.
Right.
Yeah.
It was, a really interesting mixture of, Hamilton the musical exists, but also, we're not going to say that it exists. And that was, to me, I'm you didn't invent Hamilton. You know what I mean?
And it's funny because they did a lot of name dropping of other kind of political stuff too.
Yeah.
But before we dive too deep into that conversation, because we're excited. As you can see, we're already chomping at the bit to get going. Sophie and Frannie, why don't y'all introduce yourselves to our listeners? Who are y'all? Why are y'all here? How can they tell your voices apart if they've never heard you before? What's the deal?
Oh my gosh. I think Sophie maybe talks slower than me. I think I'm kind of a fast talker. I don't know. We do have similar vocal, of course. As white women who do a podcast, we do have vocal fries, so that's not going to be helpful to anyone. But yeah, we host Girls Like Us, so that we're a podcast that covers YA literature, and we kind of do main series. So we covered The Click and then Pretty Little Liars, and then we kind of intersperse that with random one-off YA books. And so that those can kind of run the gamut. This next week, we're going to be covering Prep by Curtis Sittenfeld. So basically, if you grew up, in the 2000s reading YA lit, we're probably going to cover one of your favorite books from when you were a tween.
Oh yeah, I listened to your Looking for Alaska episode the other day.
Yeah, Frannie's the smart one and I'm the angry one. I feel as kind of evidenced by that podcast.
I feel like that's warranted. My only really John Green experience is my advisor for my master's being well, if you're going to write about sex stuff, you're going to have to read Looking for Alaska.
Yeah.
And then I did. And then your podcast had many of the feelings that I had about it.
If you want to know what a blowjob is, you're going to have to read the scene where Alaska gives a blowjob to a tube of toothpaste.
It's just funny. As we said on that specific podcast, it's just weird to in real time as an adult be oh wait, this is what ruined me. I found it out. This is it. This is what's wrong with me. All these years I've been trying to unpack something that I couldn't name, and it was actually just the novel Looking for Alaska by John Green that ruined my life fully.
Oh my god, I'm very glad that I have not read this one. Based on what y'all were saying, it kind of seems like nightmare fuel in some ways, especially as an adult. That doesn't sound like something I need.
No, leave it alone.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were saying that it was kind of like it was truly like we were transported back to the feelings that we had as like 16-year-olds, which is not pleasant. So I would not recommend it, especially in the kind of after the year-long trauma that we've all endured. It was a lot for my brain.
Yeah. John Green, baby, if you're listening, email me. I've got questions. Like, shoot me an email. It's in my Twitter bio. Like, it's easy. I'm easy to find.
Well, if y'all couldn't tell from that little outburst there, we're all English majors in one sense or another. And it's something that I know we've laughed about a little bit before the podcast, but the fact that it seems like the study of literature just leads you to doing podcasts about literature. So, like...
Yeah. Here's my theory on it. I'm going to say that all of us were and this is, obviously, I don't know you two that well, but this is a snap judgment that I'm going to make, okay? I'm guessing that we were all people who talked a lot in our English classes.
No way.
And and we were probably like... you get, at least at my school, you would get like an English class and it would be like, 50% of people were majors and then you'd get some like non-majors who were like fulfilling like, random stuff too, who did not want to talk. And I think that that's a skill that we've all had to kind of develop. And of course, the job market is not going to, there's no job that's really going to let us use those skills in our day-to-day life. But I think we've come to realize that as kind of an outlet, right? So when we no longer have the outlet of the classroom setting to do that in, next best thing, it's got to be a podcast, right?
Yeah, getting
That's
on
my theory.
mic with the boys.
And so here's a weird question. Were you guys kids who recorded yourselves on, maybe I guess it wouldn't be tapes, but like on the computer? I used to like sit with my microphone and like a cassette tape and just record myself, I don't know, doing what, voice acting, pretending to be different characters. So it's kind of like... This was the path.
I actually I made a podcast in 6th grade called Poke News, which was about Pokemon. And I believe I also had a very short one about Twilight, which was in 7th grade. I was very, very into This American Life and Wait, Don't Tell Me. And so this was kind of, so I have certainly grown up in the podcast sphere.
Yeah, I was like, I'd gotten big trouble as like a 10-year-old because my parents found a YouTube channel that I had made where I was like singing, and like I had like a broken arm at the time, so like my arm was like bound like up above my head, and I like put on like a leotard and sang a bunch of songs from the musical Chicago and put them on YouTube. And my parents were like, you need to take this down. Like, have you heard about like internet safety? So that was my main experience. My dad was always trying to like get me, like when podcasts first came out, like anybody could make a podcast. He would like record me and like try to get me to like, I don't know, be funny on mic. And I just, kind of refused. So, it wasn't in my blood, I will say. I mean, it's a learned trait.
It's a whole nother thing to have to be funny on command. You know, it's like, I'm funny for me, damn it. I'm not going to make jokes just because you tell me to. So like, I get that. Well, excellent. So I guess before we dive into our red, white, and royal, it's going to be hell for me to say that name every time. Like, I'm going to have to make an acronym out of it. I'm messing up every time with the royal blue. It turns into royal woo. But yeah. Before we get into that, let's do a really quick round of What's Sparking Joy, in which we talk about a piece of media, video game, comic book, television show, piece of music that is bringing you joy in this difficult half a year we have been having. So, Corinne, what's sparking joy for you?
Yeah, so as longtime listeners may know, I'm very into K-dramas. This is well established. But my current K-drama genre obsession are horror rom-coms. And there's one airing right now called alternately Sell Your Haunted House or Daebak Realty, in which the female lead is a exorcist who runs a real estate company and will exorcise ghosts and then sell the properties. And I deeply love it. That's
incredible.
It is my favorite genre convention because it is so practical in a genre that is ridiculous that it's just deeply, deeply funny.
So I don't appreciate how scary this one is, though. Corinne was like, oh, horror rom-coms, they're not scary, it'll be fine. I have screamed, I want to say, at least 3 or 4 times about ghosts popping up out of nowhere, being in, like, the sauna and in people's apartments. And
oh
then,
my gosh. How many ghosts? Like, it scares me that this is a profitable business for this character. Like, that's not something I want to think about personally.
No.
I mean, I've seen a lot of horror rom-coms because I, like, seek them out now. And also I have no horror tolerance. Like, 0, none. Absolutely none. But, like, horror rom-coms, I'm like, yeah, this works. I'm here for this for some reason. And, yeah, I started Aeoni on one that is, like, on the scarier side, I think.
what was the one that, like, I screamed and grabbed you? Was that the water ghost?
I think that was the water ghost.
No, she popped out of nowhere. She
popped out of the water.
I mean, okay, she popped out of the water. But like, and we knew it was coming. You were like, oh, there's a water ghost. A water ghost is coming. Yeah. And I was prepared. And then she appeared and I screamed like a banshee. But the most, well, I guess this is a spoiler if you're going to watch Daybach Realty. But like, a dude just got hit by a dump truck.
That was a lot.
We did not see that coming, and I think we screamed so loud we scared my outside cat, who kind of jumped in the window and was like, "Oh, I just called him my outside cat." Corinne, did you hear that?
Yeah,
he's not my
cat now.
No, he's not my cat. He belongs to the streets
now.
He belongs to the streets.
He belongs to the streets. But he jumped in the window and was like, "Man, are you guys okay? Are you all right?" Because we screamed so loud about that dump truck. But yeah.
I'm ready for ghosts. I'm not ready for people to get hit by moving vehicles.
Yeah.
It's a different stake situation.
What streaming platform is this on?
I've been watching it on Viki.
Okay.
Yeah, Viki works largely pretty well. I'm not sure if that's one you have to have a subscription to it for or not, but they have some that are free with annoying commercials. But
cool. That sounds like I will be looking that up after this record.
It's a delight. Highly recommend.
I want to hear what your reaction is to the dump truck when it appears.
Oh yeah,
please.
I'll be on the lookout for it.
All right, Aeoni, what is sparking joy for you?
So I had just started watching Castlevania a couple days ago, and I am now in season 3, which lets you know how that's been going. It's so gory, and I insist on watching it only when I eat, apparently. So I'm like, I'm gonna have some cereal and watch these guts fall out on the floor. But I've been enjoying it a lot. I'm a little obsessed with Alucard, I have to admit. That is a character trope that I think I have been deeply in love with since I was a 12-year-old watching Digimon as a child. But the broody blonde character with emotional issues, oh my god, that strikes to the core of everything I love, apparently. But it's really good. I'm enjoying it. My brother has said that the ending was trash. So we'll see how that goes. But other people have said that season 4 is really good. So I don't know. Watching some monsters be brutally beaten up and hot people walking around, that's sparking joy in my life right now. I want Corinne to watch it, but she's not going to do gore. So
challenging, yeah.
But yeah. All right, let's keep moving around the squares. Sophie, what's sparking joy for you?
Okay, so Frannie stole mine in the doc. I was going to say Real Housewives of Beverly Hills because that's the only thing Frannie and I both watch. All we do is watch that show. Truly, that is all I do. If I was a sim, the software would warn you that I was doing too much of the same thing, which was watching Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. It truly is at the same time, both mind numbing, but also a celebration of your mind in a lot of ways. It does require critical thinking skills in some parts because you're wait, who's in the wrong? And the drama over going to the wrong restaurant. But I'll let Frannie explicate more on that. So my boyfriend and I are about to do a cross-state move. And so we're starting the process of packing, and we're basically we can't really afford to get a U-Haul for a cross-state move because they're super expensive. And so we're packing everything into a van instead. And so we're getting rid of most of our furniture. So I've been shopping for vintage furniture online, which is truly the best way to kill however many hours you need is vintage Moroccan rugs on Etsy and just scrolling. And so I already have purchased multiple rugs. I am looking for a couch right now. And it's it feels like a project. like you're doing work. Like it feels productive because you're like, well, I need a place to sit. You know what I mean? Like I need a place to sit. So like, obviously I have to buy a couch. So like me looking at these couches, I'm actually like, this is an incredibly like worthwhile pursuit. Like I'm not laying in bed on my bed desk, like with my head down watching Real Housewives of Beverly Hills and endlessly scrolling. I'm searching for a couch. Like that's something that like a productive young woman does. So, you know, furniture shopping, I'd recommend it. Get rid of all your furniture and buy, you know, weird stuff from Etsy.
So I have to ask, because my spouse really wants to get a new couch, and he's been saying constantly, I hate our couch. I hate our couch. And like, a little shade to a friend of mine who I adore, but like, I want to say the first week we had the couch, he sat down really hard on it and cracked it. So our couch has been cracked for like the last 5 or 6 years. If you sit in this one spot, it makes this really sad sound.
That's what that is.
Yeah, that's what that is.
Yeah, wow.
So where are you looking at couches? That's a really boring question. I'm sorry.
So the best thing to do is to find like Instagram accounts for like, if you want to buy a vintage couch like we do, because, you know, we feel bad getting rid of a bunch of our furniture, even though like people have already bought it from us and stuff. And most of it is going to like the person moving into our apartment after us.
Okay.
But we're like, we don't want to buy like new stuff, right? Because like, you know, waste the environment, etc. So I would recommend finding like Instagram accounts for vintage stores wherever you're located, and then kind of going from there. So like that you kind of get in the know about like where do they buy their stuff, like how do they kind of source things, what other accounts do they follow that maybe like do more what you're looking for, like, you know, because some vintage stores it's like maybe it's 100 lamps and like 3 couches, and it's like, well, I don't really need a lamp, I need a couch. So like, what other couch accounts do you follow? And it's like, it's a very, you know, it's a web of like, if I had it plotted out on my wall, it would be like that crazy meme from It's Always Sunny. Like, it's a tangled situation.
It sounds like a deep hole that I'm a little afraid to go down, but also very intrigued by. When you were like, what couch account? I'm like, couch accounts? Yeah. There are couch accounts? Well, now I have to look up what this is. So
yeah, it's, you know, it's a worthy pursuit, I definitely would say.
You've heard it here first, y'all. This is how to find a vintage couch through the Instagrams. And last but not least, Frannie, what's sparking joy for you?
So Sophie spoiled it, but yes, I am going to say Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. I think what is sparking joy about it to me, and it's like similarly to like, you know, I never watched any of the Trump SNL sketches when he was in office, but I let myself, once he was out of office, watch the terrible, terrible Hotline Bling sketch that he was in. I was like, oh, this is bad, but I can laugh at this a little bit now, right? And similarly with the Housewives, what is morbidly sparking joy for me is the fact that they're acting as if COVID doesn't exist. COVID only exists aesthetically, like in like their mask choices. And yes, it was filmed in October of 2020. So probably, you know, at the height of everything bad happening.
Especially in LA. Like, LA was like the epicenter of world COVID in 2020.
Yeah. So, you know, that being said about them, Kathy Hilton's on the show now, mother of Paris Hilton, sister of Kyle Richards. They're in Tahoe right now in the episode that I just watched, and she stays up until 2 a.m. drinking a Red Bull and reading newspapers.
That's a bitch after my own heart.
Right, exactly. And then she sleeps until 12, and all the other women go on like... It's like a... it's like a car that like they kind of bike along a railroad track. Like they're like on this little roller coaster of their own making. It looked fun. I don't know what it is, but they come back and Kathy's like, oh, I thought I was putting eye drops in, but I actually put eardrops in my eye.
Oh no.
She's like, it feels like glue. So that's kind of the characters and types of, watching these types of people on TV is what is sparking joy for me right now.
That's so me on vacation, is like missing the main activity and then like self-manufacturing an illness.
Right.
Like, while everyone's gone, being like, you guys had fun skiing. I'm sick. Someone has to take me to the hospital. Like I accidentally ate like the toilet bowl cleaner or something. I don't know.
Well, I thought it was syrup for my tea.
That's so bad.
Ugh. Just thinking about eating a toilet bowl cleaner now, I'm like, that's not an image I thought I needed. But okay,
I'm sorry.
I'm gonna sit with that one for a little bit.
Here's what I'll say is that there is that one toilet bowl cleaner, whatever the Clorox brand is, that does smell like mint, and it does smell pretty good. So if I'm going to eat, I would rather eat that than Windex. You know, let's disregard like the health implications. I'm just saying
Why
that
are you bringing Windex into it?
Because Windex smells bad. That's a bathroom cleaner, right?
Have you never cleaned a bathroom?
Yeah, you clean the mirror in the bathroom with Windex. I think it,
but it's
Sophie,
not a
I think it
bathroom
counts.
Cleaner.
I would beg to differ.
I mean, there is multi-purpose Windex. You know, for many
you can use it on the
surfaces.
shower drawer.
As a Greek person and a person who is obsessed with cleaning their bathroom, I take offense to like Windex being brought into the conversation.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
Like, this is just harmful. Like,
I'm sorry, this should be a safe space. We won't talk about Windex anymore. We'll stop. But that actually seems like a good segue, or not. It might be a terrible segue, but I'm gonna write it anyway. This is the segue we're gonna write into to Red, White, and Royal Blue. What are our initial reactions before we introduce the text? To be a little teachery, right? What are your initial thoughts about the text that we have read for today?
I would say so. I did myself a disservice because I had a lot of, moving related chores to do in the last couple weeks, which is that I listened to this book on audio. And something that a lot of, I brought this up to Frannie last night, a disease that a lot of, new audiobooks have is that for some reason, the voice actors reading the book, really feel the need to do voices for different characters based on their ethnic identity.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And it's, something that has been popping up in things I've listened on audio recently where I'm wait, this isn't the 90s. We are not, this isn't okay. What is going on? What are you being directed to do? So that was distracting for me. But other than that, I don't know. It was a lot of fun. It felt like it was published in 2019. So all of the cultural references and the way that the characters talk feels very current. I strongly disliked the main character, Alex.
Ditto. I second that.
Couldn't stand him. If I was in a room with him, I would be if I had one drink, I would be screaming at this man, truly. They would be who's that dumb bitch screaming at the son of the president? She's crazy, get her out of here. The Secret Service would have to come to my apartment again and talk to me. It's just, I don't know. So that was the main thing, is I was distracted by the odd choices in voice acting. And then also how much I disliked the main character.
I'm gonna jump in really quickly. I second that. I didn't know if it was just me, but he felt, and we'll talk more about him, but he felt a little pretentious to me. I was how old are you? You're going to talk to me like this? I know he wasn't talking to me. I'm not in the book, but it just felt like he was real. I don't know. I wouldn't like him if we were interacting in person, because I have a thing about people who like to show you how smart they are, and which is really a fun thing when you're in a PhD program, right? Around a whole bunch of people who really want to show you how smart they are. But it's just, he just really, to use a really oldie-timey expression, he really ground my gears. He just got on my nerves. I did like how snippily it was written, though. It was kind of a snappy text, which was a lot of fun to kind of work my way through. So, some of my highlighting were just lines that I thought were really good lines, rather than times where I'm like, Alex, just be quiet for 5 minutes.
Right.
So I have this kind of weird dual feeling about the book, that it was fun to read, but then there were things about it that I just didn't necessarily gel with. So
yeah, I think that's kind of a good way to put it. I was telling Sophie before you two hopped on that this book did make me cry, but I also think that it needs to kind of exist in a vacuum for me to derive any real pleasure from it, being that, Sophie kind of brought up, there's she texted me, she's like, is this kind of just an imperialist fan fiction? And I'm a little bit, yeah. It was odd to read about, especially because I know that the author started writing this in 2016. And I think a lot has changed in the way, and I know that I just said that I watched the Trump SNL sketch, but in the way that we're consuming kind of the personalities of political figures, I think a lot of us have become more savvy in that, maybe. And I'm trying to think of like political shows that like I watch. Well, I have been watching Tyler Perry's The Oval, which is his show, of course, about the first family. But I would say that the ideas of that show are very far removed from like policy.
Reality.
Yeah, reality. Yeah. There's a lot of like people jumping out of moving cars and cults and stuff. And like, this is probably not taking place in DC right now. I would recommend it. It's honestly like, it is a fun escape because it is very fast moving. Like there's always going to be something going on there. So, but you know, like the other political show that I watched a lot of, you know, was Veep, and Veep was interesting. And I felt like the author of this maybe like watched Veep and was like, I think I need to curse as much as they do, because every character cursed in this, like truly, like other than Her Royal Majesty, the Queen, every character. I was like, and Sophie, I mean, this wouldn't happen in my house, but maybe in someone like Sophie's household. I was like, the president, the mom was cursing so much.
Dude, wouldn't you if you were like responsible for like healthcare and like the army?
Right. Yeah, true. But yeah, so it did make me cry because of some of the like, you know, gay relationship stuff. But yeah, there was a lot that I thought was, it did kind of feel like a Hamilton fan fiction come to life.
The premise I will never be able to get behind is feeling sympathy for the royal family. Like, I really, like, I can, on a personal level, I'm like, the emotional things that you've been put through and what you've been deprived of, like, as a human being in your, like, literal development as, like, an emotional creature, like, I get it, but also at the same, it's like, I can't do a whole scene where he's like, it was so hard being the prince because everybody knew my name and I didn't want them to. And I'm like, dude, I pay like $300 a month just for my prescriptions. Like, can we get to that part, please? Like, I'm not here for it right now. Like, it's hard. I'm like, this is why we don't have healthcare, because like the president has to do a presentation for her son about like why it's unethical for him to fuck the literal crown prince of England. Like, I'm like, this is what they're doing over there.
The truth comes out.
Yeah.
So I definitely agree and ride with all y'all's critiques, but I will say, as a person who is from Texas, the sort of political fantasy of what Texas, I don't know, could be like if it ever did go blue really like hit me in a way I was not expecting, as someone who has not lived in Texas for 10 years. Like, I've been gone, but like that fantasy and like that sort of dream was still there, and I don't think that would have hit so hard for me if it didn't have convincing details about what Texas is like and things that someone who grew up in Texas would know or would like. So I don't know, maybe what I'm saying is almost in the way of a fantasy novel. The world building, I think, was really important for how things landed, and in some ways that was maybe not effective, but at least for me, the Texas stuff was very effective.
Yeah.
That's I mean, obviously I'm not from Texas, but I also felt similarly to, like, because the main character, Alex, he spends so much time going through that Texas binder and thinking about, like, how, you know, like, the demographic changes and, like, the way that people think in Texas. And I also found that to be, like, that was a really good point in which the novel was really specific, that served it really well at being, like, okay, it made the characters feel more grounded. Because at times, the characters, especially, like, arguably, like, the three main characters who weren't the prince, like, the Alex, his sister, June, and the granddaughter of the vice president, Nora, they just felt inaccessible to me in different ways, where it was like, what are these people, like, they just, like, hang out in the White House and banter with one another and, you know, ostensibly, like, do jobs, but, like, what is really grounding them, like, within this story was, like, at certain times kind of inaccessible to me.
So before we get too deep into our analysis, perhaps we should give a summary of the book for people who have not read it.
We don't have to do that. Who needs that? Red, White, and Royal Blue is a 2019 queer romance novel by Casey McQuiston. Is that right?
McQuiston. You added an N.
See, I can never do it. McQuiston. And the book was a New York Times bestseller and an award winner. It won the 2020 Alex Award and the 2019 Goodreads Choice Award, both for Best Romance and for Best Debut. So this is a book that it seems like a lot of people are reading and enjoying. Corinne mentioned yesterday that she's like, as we very timidly go and sit at outside coffee shops to try to get work done, is seeing people reading the book.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
So even kind of, I guess, we're a year and a half, 2 years removed now from publication, it's still something that's making rounds and that people are interested in picking up. So kind of a popular text, even though some people in this podcast chat are not necessarily the wildest about it. Corinne, you want to take the description?
Yeah, so this is from Goodreads. And all right, the summary. First son, Alex Claremont Diaz, is the closest thing to a prince this side of the Atlantic. With his intrepid sister and the Veep's genius granddaughter, they're the White House Trio, a beautiful millennial marketing strategy for his mother, President Ellen Claremont. International socialite duties do have downsides, namely when photos of a confrontation with his longtime nemesis, Prince Henry, at a royal wedding leak to the tabloids and threaten American-British relations. The plan for damage control, staging a fake friendship between the first son and the prince. As President Claremont kicks off her re-election bid, Alex finds himself hurtling into a secret relationship with Henry that could derail the campaign and upend two nations. What is worth the sacrifice? How do you do all the good you can do? And most importantly, how will history remember you?
Who lives, who dies, who tells your story? Yeah.
It truly, it's like, say Hamilton. Just say it. Like, we all know we're thinking it. Like, just say it. But, you know, it's none of my business. Frannie and I can do the characters, or do you want to, sorry, were you?
No, I was just going to say real quick before we dive into the characters, I got to say, as an elder millennial, what do they call us? Geriatric millennials, right? So as
That's
the,
you, not me. Don't put that on
okay,
me.
all right. But as the ancient one on the call, like the fact that these 21-year-olds are like the beautiful millennial marketing strategy, I'm like, yo, we can't buy houses. Like,
Right.
they've been yelling at us about avocado toast for years, but you want me to like sit with the, it's fine. This is just me griping and being angry. But yes, y'all, please, characters.
Sophie, I'll just go ahead. I'll do A through E, and you want to take F through K?
I can take F through K.
Okay, so we got our two main love interests. So Alex Claremont Diaz, who is the first son of the United States, and his love interest, Henry Fox Mount Kristen Windsor, is a British prince, and he's third in line to the throne of England. June Claremont Diaz is the first daughter of the United States and Alex's older sister. And then Ellen Claremont is their mother, and she's the first female president of the United States. In this universe, she directly succeeded Obama, and she's a Democrat from Texas. And then Zara Bankston is the deputy chief of staff for Ellen Claremont.
Yeah, so Nora Halloran is also like one of the main characters. She is a former lover of Alex and also the granddaughter of the vice president. And now they're, you know, Alex and June are best friends, and they make up what in the universe is the beautiful millennial marketing strategy of the White House Trio. I don't know what they're selling, like rainbow capitalism. I don't know.
That's what I was interested in, because I was like, you know, with the Obamas, like, I'm trying, I feel like when the only like son or daughter or someone related to a president that I could think of in recent years who, like, I was like, oh, they could be used as a marketing strategy is Kamala Harris's bisexual stepdaughter. But that's it. But I'm like, I don't think that, like, we as a nation are, like, have thought of very many of, like, children or close relatives of the presidents as, like, I don't know, like, fashion icons, which is I kind of like the vibe that they're giving us here. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but you know.
I mean, I don't think you're wrong, but I also think, thinking about recent history, which is unpleasant, the way that they tried to use, like, Ivanka, I think.
Oh,
might apply.
Yeah. I did just forget about her. I was like, children are people under 20, and so I forgot about Ivanka.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
So Percy, whose name is also, his nickname is Pez, is the best friend of Prince Henry. He's like a billionaire and like the founder and proprietor of many like charities and nonprofit organizations. we'll get into like the function I think that charity plays in this book. It's very, to me, I'm like, what is happening here? Where are they hiding the money type thing? And then Beatrice has the same last name as her brother, Prince Henry. I'm not going to say it because it's long and it's, you know, it's very British. She's the younger sister of Prince Philip, who's like the first in line for the throne, and she's the older sister of Prince Henry. She is sober, I believe, because she had some struggles in her past with substance abuse, which kind of informs Henry's relationship to the monarchy, because he went through this very traumatic experience of like seeing the way that was dealt with, and like for her to get the help she needed, it was like very kind of traumatic for everybody involved. Oscar Diaz is a senator from California, and he's the father of Alex and June Claremont Diaz, and the ex-husband of the president, Ellen Claremont. Rafael Luna is a young independent senator from Colorado. He's Latino and openly gay, so Alex really looks up to him, as he's worked for him before, and he also, you know, sees this model of like a queer person who is confident and yet still doing the kind of work that Alex eventually wants to do. And then he's later disappointed by that relationship, as we are in our lives with every relationship. And then the last character that we have here is Sean Srivastava, who is the equerry to Prince Henry, and him and Zara like fall in love. So congratulations to the two of them.
Which, and perhaps I just skimmed over this, but for some reason I thought that they said that Sean was gay. Did anyone else read that? Or was that just me?
No, they said that Sean was the only person who knew that Henry was gay.
Because I was like, what?
Yes.
I was like, what happened? Okay. That makes sense.
So we all kind of have our divided feelings about the book, right? So something that Corinne and I often like to think about is who this book is for, right? Of course, it's being marketed as YA, but like, I don't know
if it's being marketed as YA.
Oh,
YA.
it's not?
No,
is
it's being marketed as like a new adult-ish romance book, but it also has like young adult vibes. Like my college student book club was very into this book and are some of the people who recommended it to me. So I think particularly the college student age crowd who also love to read YA are the people this book is kind of like aiming to hit.
Okay. And I mean, that makes a lot of sense because, like, the book made me feel really old in a way that I wasn't expecting. Like, I normally don't have that kind of visceral, you're ancient reaction when I'm reading YA, but just, like, something about this book seemed very, I don't know, like, it was setting itself very outside of my realm of experience in a way and my realm of interest in a way that I wasn't expecting. So, like... Yeah, did you guys have the same reaction? Where is it like, you know, oh, this is definitely for kind of like college age folks who love Hamilton? Like, where was y'all's heads at with that?
Yeah, I think new adult, I think it falls pretty strongly in this range. I could see myself really reading and enjoying this book at about like 15, 16 as you're starting to be like, okay, YA is not for me anymore. I'm not getting what I used to get out of this. I'm gonna start looking through my mom's bookshelf. Like, this is kind of where, at least the genre and the way that it's written, like, this is where I landed at about that age.
Yeah, I think that I was surprised when the characters were as old as they were, because in my mind, and like seeing the cover, it does look very like older YA, so like I would think like 16 to 18, but I do think, you know, even if it wasn't marketed, even if it was marketed as new adult, I do think that there's a fair bit, like Sophie said, of YA readers, like once you kind of hit 15 that are probably reading this. So it read very much like a YA book to me, but I guess just because of the age of the characters, I was like, well, maybe it's marketed at slightly older folk than that.
Well, I wonder if they were trying to like, I mean, maybe they've succeeded, I don't know, to like hit both the sort of like older teenage and adult reader audience, because I remember when this book came out, I'm like a little bit plugged into romance Twitter, and people were very into it then, like a year ago. And I think, also just, by the way, Casey McQuiston also just had another book come out a few days ago called One Last Stop, and that seems to be getting the same kind of buzz, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I really, as a romance novel, like, this book knocks it out of the park. Like, the way the romance is constructed, like, the you know, you have your classic trope. We all love it. Enemies to lovers. It's like, I like when they fall into, at the beginning, they get into a little tussle and they fall into a $75,000 cake. I'm like, give me this for 500 more pages. I'm like, I'm ready for it. I love it. Like, I love a $75,000 cake. I love it getting destroyed. I love like them being like, I hate you. Like, it's just incredible. And that's why I was so disappointed that I could not jive with the main character, Alex, because I was like, I like really dig the way this romance is happening. It's sexy. Like there's a lot of really great, really fun, like original sex scenes in this book where you're like, this is like really fun, really cool, great idea. They're at Wimbledon having sex. Right. Like talk about top 5 fantasies I didn't know I had. Like one is go to Wimbledon. They're not going to let me in. I don't even know how to say it. Like,
yeah, you're failing that test right off the bat.
Yeah. They're like, no. You've been on unemployment before. You're not coming to Wimbledon. Like, yeah. So that's why it was like bother. Like, I'm like, if this motherfucker Alex was talking to me like this, like I would not have sex with him. Like he's being rude. Like,
yeah, he is very rude. I think I had maybe a little more sympathy for him because I know that a big part of my like bisexual awakening was like, I was like, oh, I hate this girl. She's so pretty. Like, like that was, and then it was like, you know, like cut to like 7 years later. I'm like, oh, I guess that's what you would call a crush. Like so it was a lot of like jealousy and being like, ugh, she's so whatever. And then later I was like, so, but however, I don't think I would talk to any of those people to their face like that. Right. I would be like, you smug bastard, like,
suck my dick. Yeah. And I also, like, I don't know. I just, maybe it was like just the fact that this like, well, okay, so the queer awakening that Alex has, like, I think is very relatable, where he is like, wait, I don't like men. When Henry first kisses him, he's like, wait, this doesn't happen. Like, I don't like men. I'm with women. And then later on, he, you know, is like, well, like, you know, like he keeps referencing his friend Liam from high school. And he's like, oh, I don't talk to my closest friend from high school anymore. And like, there's little kernels of that sprinkled out through the really early parts of the book. And then it's like, you find out that he was having sexual experiences with Liam in high school that he didn't consider to be sexual.
Gay.
It was like, yeah, like a normal, yeah, exactly. Like, oh, this is a normal thing that friends do, right? Like, and that I found to be very relatable, where it's like, well, it's actually people, you know, straight people kiss their friends all the time. And like straight people do, you know, either like full frontal sexual things or like, you know, have sexual experiences near one another all the time. And that's normal. Or not normal, but that's heterosexual. Like, and that to me, like, I feel like any queer person could recognize that and be like, oh yeah, like,
yeah,
that makes sense. Yeah. So that part, and then also the fact that friendship was then kind of broken because of the different expectations of what that relationship was for each person. Like, I don't know. I definitely have some of those. So like,
so it sounds like, and not to read into anything that y'all are saying, but it's kind of sounding like that the romance worked for y'all. Like the fact how Alex and Henry got together, the way that their relationship developed, like that worked. It's just Alex that might have not necessarily worked the best.
I think the one thing, and excuse me if I'm jumping the gun on talking about this, is just that one thing that I guess like gave me pause, and like what was that I found a lot of the parts around the sex scenes to be like very explicit in either language. Like the use like dicking down is like used quite a bit, very 2019. Or like, you know, there's a lot of cursing. But then the sex scenes themselves, I found to be like kind of like vague and like unreferencing. Like there's never like, and like there's never something that's like, oh, like he put his like the word penis is never used, or like it's always like kind of moving around the idea of like a blowjob or, you know, like anal sex, and I found that just, I guess, like annoyed me a little bit, because I was like, I feel like if you're gonna go for a queer romance, like go for it, you know. And that's what kind of made this seem well, I don't know. It did seem very fan fiction to me in that way, I guess, that I wish that the author would have been a little more specific with that. I don't know.
Fan fiction to me would be dirtier. Like,
I
fan
guess that's
fiction
true.
would be like,
yeah.
fan fiction, we would know exactly what was happening at every time.
Yeah.
The thing maybe, and like, I also could be making this up, but to me, it felt like, this is so crazy that I'm getting into this, but basically, it felt like the blowjob scenes were very explicit, whereas the scenes in which they were having anal sex were very vague. And like, it was
That's
like, there was kind of a like, they were being a little bit precious about the anal, where like,
I feel like with the blowjob though, they would never be like, "Oh, he came." Like, I felt like they would never use the word "come." I would be like, "Did they both come? Like, what happened?" I don't know. I may be nitpicking here, but it's like, if you're gonna get me hot and heavy with the use of the term "dicking down," like, let's go all the way. Come on.
Yeah.
I mean, it's always very interesting with YA or YA adjacent text how concerned they are about being didactic and how concerned about being like too how-to or too clear about how to do something, but also at the same time being like, but make sure you use a condom.
Right, exactly. Make sure you use your travel-sized bottle of lube. Yeah,
that was so.
Do you think that that's like also like? I wonder if this was something. I don't know what imprint this was published on or who published it, but I wonder if that was a note like to like appeal to more readers. We have to tone down the actual logistics of the gay sex scenes. I mean, I wonder if that's a function of them being gay, because I feel like, and you know, we mentioned that we're going to talk about Prep next week, which, you know, I guess probably came out in like early 2000s, but
2005.
That book is very, very, very explicit with its sex scenes, including giving the reader basically instructions on how to give a blowjob with a thing of ice cream and then looking for Alaska. Like, I wonder if it's a function of them being two men that, I wonder if that got like cut in edits at all. I don't know. That's speculation. But.
I mean, that's a good question. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No,
Ayani.
really quickly. Just the publisher is St. Martin's Griffin.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah, I don't. It's in New York, so. But St. Martin's Press is the press.
Okay.
Oh, it's under Macmillan. It's part of Macmillan.
Oh, okay.
Gotcha.
So, but like thinking about what they might have cut, worrying about censorship or even just like self-censorship unofficially, like, I don't know. I feel like if it's a gay love story, like it's already going to be censored by people who are opposed to that anyway. Right. But also at the same time, a lot of like gay YA or YA-ish texts focus a lot more on identity than actually characters getting to have sex. So I don't know. Maybe it's like a baby steps kind of situation.
Yeah,
totally.
That's fair. Yeah.
Yeah. I just want, you know, when it's like two guys, you spend the whole book telling me how hot these two dudes are. Like, let me see it. You know, like, take me to the damn movies. Like, prove it. Prove that they're hot.
It's funny, too, because I feel like there was a lot of focus on kind of depicting their bodies, if it makes sense, without telling us exactly what the bodies were doing. Like, one of the things that I recall very distinctly are the little ridges of Henry's backbones sticking up under his skin, which
that
I'm like,
soft if you touch them.
Yeah. So there are these. He's very thin, I'm guessing, if his backbones are sticking up like that. But like, there are these moments where there's like loving care paid attention to how the body is described, but then, as you were saying, Frannie, in those like sex scenes, we don't go all the way. We just kind of get like, there's some thighs, which I like. I like thighs. So like, there's some thighs, and then some hands go here, but then we don't. There's not that same kind of loving care and attention to describing the body, I think.
I think the closest thing that we actually got, and this is interesting because the closest thing that we got to like them actually describing like, oh, like mouth on penis or whatever was the Liam sex scene when it was like, oh, they were watching porn and like he leaned over and started jerking him off. Like, and I'm like, that's interesting so because hot. that is so fucking hot. That was a relationship that was used as not romantic. It was just sexual. And I'm like, that's interesting that was allowed to be characterized as like sexual, but like when they're, you know, together in a romantic context, the author doesn't want to go there.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know. But, like, I have it in here, and I feel like this is a natural move where somebody wants to... You guys have it in here. We want to talk about the emails, and I feel like the emails are a good jumping off point here, because, like, the emails are where we get, I would say, like, the most characterization of the romance.
yeah.
Like, they feel very comfortable talking to one another over email and over the phone rather than, like, face to face. Like, a lot of in the first times they meet and engage in sex, like, there's not a lot of talk about, like, you know, hopes, desires, dreams, backgrounds, parents, etc. It's mostly just sex, but then all of the talk about the personal life comes from the emails. First of all, the emails are what turned me off from Alex, because he brought in this whole thing like, have you heard of Alexander Hamilton? I love him. You should read this book about him.
Yeah, that makes it seem like that, like, people aren't commonly aware of Alexander Hamilton, which obviously, like, in 2016 they would be.
It's like, you would have to, I wish I wasn't aware of Alexander Hamilton. Like, I wish I knew less about Alexander Hamilton.
And then they're like, he's gay, actually. I thought that was interesting, too. Or bisexual, maybe, but...
Yeah. I don't know. Like, it was just, first of all, I don't like when you were listening to, this is my specific complaint with the audiobook, so I apologize for everybody who didn't engage in the audiobook. When you're listening to an audiobook, and they describe either text conversations or email conversations, they have to demarcate who is talking, and it's always very awkward because it's not physically in front of you.
Right.
So there's, like, I guess Alex puts Henry's name in his phone as, like, His Royal Highness poop emoji.
Yes.
And
His
so
Royal
the amount
Highness
of
dickhead poop emoji.
Yes, excuse me. The amount of times I had to hear this poor voice actor say poop emoji was like, I, like, just at a certain point shorten it. Like, just say His Royal Highness. Like, stop saying poop emoji. Like, I'm an adult. I'm trying to clean my storage unit right now. You know what I mean? But yeah, I thought the emails, like... I thought they did a really good job of showing us what these two had in common that we didn't get necessarily when they were in person.
Yeah. The emails are interesting, too, because, you know, and I think a lot of us wrote about this in the notes, but, like, the idea that... So the political family in this is a Democrat in America. And then we never really get, like, a good read on, you know, because it's a symbolic whatever in the UK, but... Henry seems to be at least somewhat, like, liberal. And so throughout the book, there's, like, some, like, they kind of, like, trade barbs about, like, well, your country, like, you know, was racist in this way, or, you know, your country was classist in this way. And in a way that feels, number one, very disconnected. And I'm like, I don't really want my politicians joking about this, because guess what? You could change some of this materially for many people. And second of all, like... it makes me think that the author was, like, very into Hillary because of the whole email thing, because it's like, actually, these leaked emails were good. And, you know, I'm not, you know, we read Rodham, the Curtis Sittenfeld Hillary. What if Hillary didn't marry? But yeah, and you know what? So, and we have our fair share to say about that, but, like, it does seem like written by someone who maybe, like, is engaging in politics in a way that I can no longer do as someone who lived through, you know, 2016 onward, if that makes sense.
Oh, that makes complete and total sense. Like, after I finished the book, I was texting Corinne about just, I don't know, a weird sense of, not like full-blown depression, but, like, I was sad after reading it, because I was like, this isn't what happened. We had 4 years of Trump. We had an insurrection. You know, her emails were a big deal. You know, so it's just like... especially, like, as a person of color, like, I don't know, a lot of it felt like that kind of political wish fulfillment. Just, I guess the way we were saying it is, it's like too far away, but also too close. Because, you know, I wish, you know, if the first child came out, there would be a big, happy, wonderful celebration on the lawn for them. But also, we're now getting ready to be concerned that Roe v. Wade might be rolled back in particular ways and, like, in real life. So it was just, like, this disconnect for me between the kind of political landscape that was being set up in the book and the actual lived experiences that we have. Like, to get really real for a second, right? But
no, I mean, that's the conversation this book is having. Like, I read the LA Review of Books review, and the author of this review literally said, the romance, like the fantasy of the romance in this novel is great, but you know what's even better? Picturing a world where Donald J. Trump does not exist. And it's like, but he does. And like people's lives are in danger because of that.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know.
And it's also like, you know, obviously like politicians are families and they, you know, they're individuals as well. But like, yeah, like at a certain point, like I'm not interested in Ellen Claremont as a character because I'm like, you should do your job. And like, I don't know, like, and I get it, but there's a lot of talking around policy issues. And, you know, one thing that interested me is that there's a character who's very briefly mentioned who's an independent in the Senate, who's a Vermont senator, right? And I was like, okay, so this is supposed to be a Bernie equivalent. And it was like, well, we don't know if we can get him. Like, he could go on either side of the line. And I was like, this to me feels like a misunderstanding of kind of the current landscape of American politics, where it's no longer like Democrats are good and Republicans are bad. Like, it's like, well, pretty much everybody is bad to a certain extent. Like, it feels very like, it's almost like, I'm like, well, this could appeal to like a never Trump Republican, because it kind of, I feel, operates maybe in the worldview that like, well, Donald Trump was an anomaly versus like, no, this is what, you know, centuries of our governmental system and like our bigotry as a country has led us to, you know.
It also kind of felt to me like the sort of dialogue quips, and like otherwise the dialogue I think is very sharp, but like about it being like a both America and Great Britain being genocidal empires, it felt like the kind of thing that was in there to sort of like soothe people's nerves who might otherwise be uncomfortable with like romanticizing the royal family again still. And so just enough in there to like maybe make people be like, okay, yeah, this jives enough with my politics that I can then settle into this romance that makes the royal family seem appealing still. Or
in some way. Right.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. That's a great point, where it's like thing like that, where you're like, there was a quip at one point about like who was more imperialist, like Alex's family or Henry's family. And I'm like, this is not like, truly, if these emails leaked and I saw this, I would be like, this is like, that is unforgivable. Like, that would be the thing to me where it's like, hold on, like, no, you don't get to joke about that. Like, other people can joke about that, but you sitting in your place of comfort and Alex being like his main thing is, you know, like, obviously this decision is like whether or not to come out publicly as queer, which is a huge decision, especially as a public figure, opening yourself up to that kind of ridicule and hate from people who lob those kinds of things. That's a huge decision. But also, like, you know, he's thinking about how it's going to affect his career. Like, he wants to be a career politician. It's like, so don't joke about these things. Like, don't do it. It's not funny. Like,
yeah, it's like, the characters in this book are like, we love politics. Like, we love the down and dirty of it. And like, that's like and I get that. Like, when I first, a long time in high school, I was like, oh, I want to be a political science major. But again, like, the Trump of it really changed it. And I guess kind of like woke me up to be like, no, like this, like, it's not something that I feel like we as Americans should kind of change our perception of like politics even being like fun. You know, it's like they probably shouldn't be, you know, and obviously I'm not a politician. So could we talk about the senator, the openly gay senator? I'm blanking on his name. Raphael Luna. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Was there something in specific that you want to talk about, or just
his arc and like what type of figure do we think he represents? Like, what like analogy from our current political landscape do you think that this character was kind of trying to get at?
That's tough.
Because and I guess just for listeners, like, basically the deal with this senator is he is openly gay. Alex is super close with him, and then he goes to work for the Republican candidate's campaign. And so obviously, like, Alex and his family feel very betrayed. Then at the end, it's revealed that this president or the other opponent had like sexually assaulted him when he was a staffer. And then this candidate had like dirt on him and basically blackmailed him into working with him. I don't know.
Bad.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things It almost felt to me like Rafael Luna, while he had some characterization, was in there as a plot device in a particular way that was like there was some dialogue. I was just skimming over the end of it again before we started recording, where like I don't remember if it was Raphael or Alex's dad who said like, oh well, like he was going to do whatever needed to be done to keep like a abusive predator out of office. And it's like, okay, well that is clearly speaking, you know, about not wanting a particular president to be in office. And
or a judiciary member to be on the Supreme Court, or, you know,
I'm not allowed to talk about him publicly anymore.
But like,
sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. He felt like a more fully developed character until it seemed like he was being used as a plot device for that reason, and was kind of thrown away, and also like his own political career was thrown away because he was there to be sort of a useful tool to be like, oh well, it's the president's, it's this campaign that leaked the emails, so now we know and people will get it and understand that they're bad. But he's almost a sacrificial lamb in that way.
And go ahead, Sophie.
I was just gonna say something too that like, and this might be like me clutching my pearls a little bit too hard, but there is something really specific to me where like this relationship that exists between Alex, his father, and this senator, Rafael Luna, is very specific in that all three of them are Latino men. And that's like what brings them together. That's what creates this bond that's more than politics between the three of them. These scenes in which it's being written by a person who is not Mexican felt to me a little bit like too inside baseball with the way the guys were talking to one another, like a little bit like it just felt kind of like a caricature of how maybe a white person thinks that Mexican men would talk to one another. Like, is that pearl clutchy as like a white woman coming into that?
So I'm not gonna lie, that was something that I was thinking about a lot in this text. And I think for me, not to like move too much away from the conversation about Raphael, but for me, it really zoned in on Zara as like a very kind of strong Black woman archetype kind of figure. And it's not that those kind of characters can't exist, but it sounds like she's the only Black person in the entire book. If I
was Nora Black?
I didn't read Nora.
They didn't say. Okay. I'm only saying that because I looked up fan art after one of the fan arts. I was like, oh, she's Black. I guess I missed that, but I mean, it wasn't explicitly. Yeah,
it's worth thinking about the way that we are supposed to read and figure out who is what ethnicity. When we're not listening to someone do a bad accent on an audiobook. But like
that might be part of my uncomfortableness with it, where it was like this very like, you know, the use of slang in Spanish and things like that were kind of being thrown out, that I was just like, you know, there's different ways to write this that doesn't feel like too familiar with like a way of like a very specific codified way that a community speaks to each other that like you're not a part of. And maybe that's because I'm coming out of like a program in college where in like the creative writing classes I took, there were a lot of like white kids writing like really, really crazy dialogue between characters of color that was like, somebody come in here and shoot me in the face before I have to critique this. But yeah, it's just like this weird, it feels like melting pot fan fiction.
Yeah.
In those ways. Where it's like everybody, like there's not a lot of talk about, like besides like the obvious, there's not a lot of talk about in the workplace that this is depicting how people's races affect their experience.
Yeah, I feel like it was a lot of surface kind of conversations about like imperialism, and we took all of these things from other countries and don't want to give them back because the queen doesn't want to return the art, but not actually like on the ground conversations, if that makes sense. And I don't know if you guys saw this, but a news article, I think it was The Guardian, put it out the other day about how like people of color and immigrants were not allowed to have roles in Buckingham Palace that were not servant roles until like 1969 or something like that. So I don't know. It just, these things keep coming out that I'm kind of like, they seem to be speaking to the novel in a way, even if it's unintentional. But yeah, a lot of it kind of feels like, and we put in the notes kind of like hashtag representation, right? Very surface level. Like, look, it almost like, I don't know if this is too dated a reference, but kind of like how Power Rangers has a little bit of everybody in it, but they're just there for like the window dressing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Sophie was saying that it was like, in terms of like the LGBTQ plus of it, it was like, okay, well, we're going to tick off each of these categories. Like, well, specifically at the end, I felt like it was kind of like it was like, oh, Amy, who was like a staffer, is like, oh, she's trans, like that's implied.
Yeah,
and
by the way,
this
whole time
yeah.
she's been trans,
right?
Like,
and the author is non-binary, so I get it. So I don't want to be too like whatever of it, but yeah, it did, and I think that's a hard line to walk, like as I guess like as a white author, which is obviously like this is not really like a real problem to have, but it's like, yeah, like how do you include diversity and like make people feel represented without being like, I have to check all these boxes and like making people feel tokenized, and that's hard to do, and like I don't think I would know how to do that, so I don't,
So I'm gonna flip the script a little bit around the other way. Are there moments where we felt like representation broadly was done well in the text? Because there are these kind of sticky points that we're noticing, but are there moments where it felt more authentic that we kind of were like, oh, okay, that's really cool. Like, so, oh, you know what? Pez is obviously Black.
Yeah.
So I think, and I said somebody wanted to talk about Pez or about money laundering. I think that was you, Sophie.
Yes, yeah, that was me. Sorry. That's a pretty outlandish accusation, but anytime I hear of rich people running multiple charities, I'm like, why multiple? It's like, where's the money? Where's it moving? What's happening? Show me the tax forms. Like,
yeah. I mean, I did like the dynamics of Pez, June, Nora, Henry, Alex, and Beatrice, like as like a group, which is kind of like a commingling of like different sexualities and races. Like, I guess I liked that in like the way that it represented like a friend group. I don't know. Like I was like, I like that. And I think that there was some thought thrown into like intersectionality of like Alex being Latino and also being gay. Like I think like that was something that he had to consider when coming out. Yeah.
I will also say I liked Nora's sort of non-dramatic coming to terms with being bisexual, particularly in contrast to Alex's, because Alex sort of has this like, identity crisis about it, which is totally fine. And if you have an identity crisis about that, that's cool. But also not everyone does. So including multiple kinds of stories, even though Nora's like coming to terms with being bi was like not that big a deal. You wouldn't write an off-Broadway play about it. Like it is a nice sort of counterpoint, I think, so that there's so maybe it's when there's instances of more than one person having a different experience within the text, it makes it feel less box checky.
Totally. I felt that I was just gonna say that because it was like that scene where he rushes in and Nora's the first person he kind of verbally processes this with and essentially comes out to. That scene to me felt like something that would actually happen between two queer friends, because like a big misconception that I feel like people have is like, in a group of friends where like multiple people are queer, they're all having the same experience of it, which is like in my life so far that definitely has not happened. Like everybody expresses and has come to terms with things and thinks about themselves in a different way. So to have the dialogue between two characters who would be viewed by like a more heteronormative piece of media as like essentially having the same sexuality, they're both bisexual. You saw the diversity of experience between the two of them, where she was like, yeah, like I'm bi, like I don't know, I can't tell if you're bi, I just knew I was bi, like, and he's like, well, he's like tabulating the things that make him straight versus the things that make him gay, and kind of having this freak out about it. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. One other thing that I think, like, kind of going off of like representation race stuff that can, like, do you guys want to talk about this in context with kind of like the Harry and Meghan stuff that happened this year?
Yes. Yep. Yes, please.
Yeah. Because that was like a sticky point to me in that. And this isn't necessarily a fault of the book, but just like, a fault of living in our world and not the world of this book was, I was like, yeah, like it was easier in the reality of this book for this prince to come out as gay, because he was white, than it was for just like a Black woman to just be in the royal family. And I was like, oh, okay. I don't know.
No, I was totally thinking about that. I literally could not stop thinking about it while reading it, because I mean, it's obviously not the exact same situation, but Meghan Markle is also biracial, right?
Right.
And there is just such vitriol towards her as a Black woman in the media. You know, I didn't watch their whole Oprah interview, but I watched like the clips that were on Twitter, right?
Oh yeah, I saw the whole thing. So
okay.
If you need a bibliography, just let me know.
Well, you probably know this better than I do then, but like it seems like their experience from inside and outside of the palace was terrible. You know, the one quote that stood out to me was somebody worrying about what color their son was going to be.
Yeah.
You know, so and that's one of those moments where again it was like too far away and too close. The thought that then the doors open up for this young biracial, bisexual man to become an official suitor is kind of like, wow, they chased Meghan and Harry out the country.
Right, yeah. They said literally don't come back here.
Yeah.
And
for
her just existing. Like, that's the other thing is, like, that's, I mean, it is breaking norms, but, like, it's not, it's different on paper. Like it shouldn't, that shouldn't have to be something that was so controversial to them. But, it was. And it's sad. Like, the fantasy is like, oops, it's just a fantasy.
I think though that you can like the feeling that we all have toward probably the Harry and Meghan situation is similar maybe to like it can help us contextualize how we feel about this book, which is that like, okay, the Harry and Meghan thing, it's like obviously like there's this weird like imperialism of it all, of like the fact that anybody is even marrying into a royal family where like taxpayers and like a huge land trust like pay their charity, like their bills to like go around and start, you know, whatever charity they please at like any given time. But also at the same time, it's like, so like we can be a little bit like, oh, Meghan, like what's going on? Why are you like what's going on there? Like you're complicit in something. But at the same time, we can be like, okay, like that, like they are fucking racist and like this is really fucked up that like the British media like cannot deal and cannot like literally even if they tried could not speak about her in a respectful way. And to me that reminds me of this book where it's like we have this like cool representation of like a queer romance novel. Like this through and through is a queer romance novel. And we are a little uncomfortable with like the imperialism of it all, but at the same time it's like it's an important step for at least some little tile of representation on the wall.
Yeah, and for me, I hope it bodes that there will be others. You know what I mean? Especially because this was such a critical such a critical success. Because I know the concern is always like, oh, if you have one movie of a kind that doesn't do well, they're not going to make any more for like 5-10 years. So like, I'm glad that this did so well, even if we have our critiques of it, because it means that there will be more and that the author will keep writing. And that, I mean, authors usually do better and better work as they write for longer and longer times. Not to say that this was a bad book, but like, you know.
Well, I just pulled up. I just was like, one last stop. That's about a train. But I didn't actually look at the description of it.
Bitch.
Yeah, I'm like, I will pick it up if it's about a train. Like, I love trains, whatever. But it's about, it's a lesbian romance, which is, you know, perhaps selfishly more up my alley than this book was. Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, I'm excited and I did enjoy reading it. I mean, it like, the critique does not negate the fact that it is like important probably in the canon of like new adult lit.
You know, it's like I said at the beginning, this is exactly what I would have gone to pick up as somebody bridging the gap between young adult lit and adult lit. Like this is the book, and like this book is perfect for someone in that age range, you know what I mean, who is still forming their ideas around these things. I think, you know, as people who have been fully, you know, voting and, you know,
as English majors who have graduated, as like people with or about to get doctorates, like
sitting, like living through the last, you know, however many years of like really watching the, you know, any illusions you still held about like the inherent goodness of American democracy falling in the last, you know, 10 years, having a front row seat to that. It's a little more like, you know, these things that shouldn't necessarily strike us as like, you know, taking us out of the world do.
Yeah.
And so I think that for a younger reader, like, this book it's a great summer read. It's a lot of fun. You get this really fun queer romance. Maybe you learn a thing or two about Alexander Hamilton and the letters that he wrote.
Yeah. And guys, if this sparked your interest in Alexander Hamilton, boy, do I have a lot of content for you. Someone's like been living under a rock and they're like, this Hamilton guy.
Well, my thing is, like, why was, like, if this, like, maybe, like, assumed queerness of Hamilton, if everybody knows about it, like, why wasn't it in the musical? It's Broadway. Like, give us a moment. Like, come on, like, give us a moment. Like, at least be like, he might have been by in one song. Like, I feel deprived.
I think also, like, Sophie, you kind of brought this up, but, like, at the end, he makes this big coming out speech, basically, and kind of the crux of it is, like, this is America. Like, even though this book, I feel like for a lot of it did teeter on the edge of being, like, you know, America is, you know, just another country, or there was, like, at the end, like, kind of a punch of patriotism that, you know, good or for better or worse, I am uncomfortable with in 2021.
Yeah, kind of essentializing the nature of what the country is.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. So, kind of as a last thought, something, and I know I keep coming back to the fact that we all study English, so forgive me, but, like, to be a little extra about it, I felt like this book was very masturbatory about the study of English, in that we had a English PhD wielding princess, which, admittedly, like, I can see the dream of that. Maybe not an English princess, but, like, a doctorate and being a princess sounds kind of nice. But then also our male lead, who is not only gorgeous and attractive, but also studies English literature at Oxford, you know, and then in all of these emails, they have quotes that are at the bottom. It feels very much like trying to appeal to a certain kind of, like, English literature study sensibility that I kind of picked up on, that honestly, I'm not 100% how I feel about it, because on one hand, I feel like as a teen, I would totally do that, like, I'm going to put quotes in the letter to tell you how much I love you from all of these people. Like, that's the kind of shit that I would have done. But also at this point, I'm like, okay, that's a decision that was made.
And I think, sorry, go ahead, Corinne.
Oh, I mean, it reminds me, I don't even remember what book it was from, but it was someone saying, like, only people between a certain age of, like, 16 to, like, 22 feel like that comfortable being that overtly romantic. And once you get past a certain age, it's just kind of, like, embarrassing.
Rude.
And there
I've had a reverse evolution.
I mean, but, like, I think it also, to maybe get a little bit Englishy and kind of nerdy about it, I'm always interested in epistolary choices in books, because, like, it reminds me of, this is the very nerdy part, but we read Pamela by Samuel Richardson in a class that I took in undergrad, which is, like, a 1700s novel that's, like, in letters, but, like, it's a very, like, weird rapey kind of novel, but, like, the way that the guy who, like, is keeping his servant girl basically captured it, that he, like, falls in love with her, is he reads her letters to her parents and is like,
I hate that.
Oh, it's a very weird book. But anyway, but, like, this idea of, like, reading someone's letters as a way to, like, fall in love with them, like, without their knowledge is very interesting in the way of, like, people reading Alex and Henry's emails as a way to sort of, like, fall in love with their relationship.
Like, be not homophobic anymore.
Yeah. And I think there was, like, kind of, you know, with the literature-ness of it, and, like, the epistolary nature, there was, like, a lot of, like, interesting, like, pooled multimedia texts. One of which that really stood out to me was there was, like, a section where it was, like, a tweet from Jezebel and then a tweet from Nate Silver.
Yeah.
I was like, this is at least, like, I found that to be a curious choice, because, again, it's like walking that line of, like, how much do you want to go into fantasy in this fake world? It's like, yeah, Nate Silver's real, and he had a rough go of it after the 2016 election. It was just kind of interesting inclusions, as well as Jezebel.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's a very, like, I don't know. And then the thing I wanted to say about that, Yanni, you were saying about, like, the literature, the quotes. I think it goes to show that as English majors, we're we are not making podcasts about the canon, right? Like we're talking about like books that
this is what
and I'm like, totally those texts like have their place, absolutely, but like that's not. Also, the only book that Alex was fucking reading was Harry Potter. Like, they mentioned that, like, 5 times, that he was like, I picked up my rugged copy of Prisoner of Azkaban and threw it in my bag.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. And, similarly with being outwardly romantic, like, maybe that's a time in one's life where you're like, I have to establish myself as really smart and knowing a lot about literature. Where then when you're an adult, you're like, you can read whatever.
Right. Like, this is the thing that I kept thinking about when reading their emails, is, like, I feel like, and we all, maybe I'm making an assumption here, but we all are people who've kind of found in the study of literature things that are fully outside of the canon as our main interest areas.
Yeah.
And this sort of myth of the canon that still pervades, even we come to this queer romance novel as like a fun, like, yes, this is the exact kind of literature that I choose to engage myself with because it is outside of the canon in a lot of ways. Like, the myth of the canon still informs the whole thing. Like, there's this idea that we have all read George Eliot.
Yeah.
Like, or that we have all read Dickens or Whitman. I know, like, this idea that
Walt Whitman, gay icon Walt Whitman. It was like Stonewall, Walt Whitman.
Yeah, like, all of these things where it's like, well, of course, because you studied English at Oxford, you've read, Great Expectations, and it's like, it's just odd. It's a very odd thing to sort of wrestle with, because it's like, this is not what, like, that field really, like, the primary, cutting edge scholarship of people studying for advanced degrees in that field right now, like, that's not really what's happening in a lot of cases. Like, that's not what people aren't sitting around kind of being like, what, Dickens quote should I send to my lover? Like,
I mean, you'd be surprised.
It was the best of times, but, like, it was also kind of the worst of times. So.
Right.
Yeah, I don't, and you guys are both more enmeshed in higher education than we are at the moment, so perhaps this is true,
So it's kind of weird, because the program that we're in is very much, like, open to people who study things outside of the beaten path.
Yeah,
or
so, like,
outside of the quote-unquote canon.
Where do you guys go again?
We're at the University of Florida, and, like,
cool.
UF has some of the top programs in the country, and comics, which is what Ayani does, and children's literature, which is what I do. So we're not really the kind of people who wanted to go to school to study Dickens.
Right.
No.
And the kind of,
as you shouldn't be. Like,
No. Only Dickens wants to do that.
Get Dickens down.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
But there are, like, Victorianists in our program, or people who do that kind of work. You're having a gasp.
No, I mean, even with the Victorianists, though, there's, like, sort of a move towards the study of empire. So looking at, like, the literature of the colonies in the Victorian era is becoming sort of more in vogue. But I also wonder if that is, like, I think part of it is by virtue of, like, we are at the University of Florida. We are not at Harvard or Yale, or
Oxford.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. I mean, I think that. I mean, everybody I know who is, like, either a Victorianist or, like, an early modernist, like, something like that, it's all a new sort of tilt where, like, my friend who's a Victorianist is studying, like, depictions of reproductive health and choices very interesting. And, like, this idea that, like, you can go to those things as a way to deconstruct empire and deconstruct patriarchy. I see more of, at least in my interactions with people who are getting advanced degrees in literature, maybe it's, the bias of, like, who I am as a person, but that's what I see more of than, like, people being like, I'm gonna read Shakespeare, and a lot of it. Like,
yeah, I'm trying to think. I don't think I could be wrong. I'm going to say this, and then someone's going to write me a note and be like, Ayani, I am a Shakespeare scholar. But, like, none of our, like, folks are Shakespeare people.
I mean,
right?
we don't really have, like, a Shakespeare. I mean, we have someone who does Shakespeare, but we don't really have a Shakespearean professor here. So someone who wants to study Shakespeare wouldn't come here.
Oh, that's fair. Okay.
Like, we don't have a medievalist. So, like, if you want to be a medievalist, don't come to Florida.
Right. Stay out.
Stay
Stay away.
Florida. Go to medieval times, bitch, if you want to study medievalists. Like,
But also, you said that, and now I low key want to go to medieval times and like eat the big pieces of meat
my
with my
gosh.
hands. Like,
that is, I think there is one in Illinois. Some background context. So Sophie and I both live in Chicago. Sophie's about to move out of state for a law school program, so
Ooh.
it's very exciting. However, I feel like Sophie moves beginning of July. Maybe we got to go to medieval times, like COVID. Like, we're vaccinated
Dog,
now.
I don't
my
feel
number one
vaccinated against medieval times.
Yeah, that's
I
true.
don't feel comfortable going there.
I haven't
I'm
done it
sorry.
yet, but my number one post-vaccination thing, like, this is what kept me going, is like, I can't wait to go back to IKEA. Like, that is like has been my dream this past year, which is kind of the theme of IKEA is Sweden, right? Like, and so it's kind of a themed, it's its own sort of, themed experience. So I don't know, we'll work something out, Sophie.
I support you.
Thank you.
But actually, I know I said last thing, but looping back to the emails, it just reminded me of something that when the emails were linked was actually when I think my adrenaline was running the highest in the entire story, because I knew that she was going to drop. I was like, these babies are sending emails back and forth through
on their work emails.
Like, you don't do that.
HR would be calling you the moment you sent the first one.
Right. They'd be like, you used the word dick. Like, we can read these.
Your emails would get flagged. They wouldn't go through.
Right.
I had that happen
like,
before. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Shout out. Me too.
But when they were leaked, I think I was, not that I didn't find the romance compelling, because I did, but it was just in those moments that I was so concerned for the characters that it kind of washed away some of the other kind of critiques I was having of the book, because I was just so worried about what was going to happen to them because of, and I guess part of that was because I know what our public backlash would be like.
Right.
And I don't know, I was just very, I think the sequence when Alex broke down crying and then all of his family was around him and hugging him and supporting him was one of the sequences that kind of got a couple tears out of me.
Yeah.
So I think, honestly, I know we were kind of bagging on the emails a little bit, but I think for me that was one of the more interesting through lines of the narrative.
Totally.
And how it kind of came together in this moment of his family coming together, and then also Henry's family kind of coming together, the queen notwithstanding. Though I imagine her bob to be like so sharp, the way they described it, I was like, oh, okay, queen, I see you.
Yeah, razor edge. I did think it was funny. And, I know, world leaders are usually old, but it was funny when the princess, Henry's mom, was talking to the queen and was like, Mom, I'm 60. Like, you don't have to talk to me about that. Like, damn, queen, like, you are old. Like, and then, like, she, like, accused, she was like, if you don't let Henry come out as gay, like, I'm going to tell the press about your slipping memory, was basically, like, the implication. I was like, okay.
Oh, but also very concerning.
Yeah,
I was like, you should just let them know. That seems like something you should just tell them.
Yeah.
But okay.
Right. Yeah. No comment on on that.
We certainly as a nation don't have any experience with older men who maybe have some mental health decline ruling our country. That's not something we could talk about right now.
I mean, I guess maybe in a sort of wrapping up kind of way. We've been a little bit hard on this book, I think rightly so, but I will say I did really like it. I enjoyed reading it. It was an enjoyable experience for me, and it made me cry more than one time. So
Same. Yeah, it was fun. I mean, I like it was, again, Sophie and I were saying that we mostly have to read like books written for 13-year-olds, and I was like, it was nice to read a book, number one, for pleasure, and two, that was kind of like marketed at my age range, like in a non like, I don't know, this wasn't like it was a buzzy book in some ways, but this wasn't like fake accounts, like the other books I'm like trying to like work my way through like in a critical way. I'm like, this was a fun like beach read, and I liked it, and I'm certainly going to buy this author's the train book.
Yeah, it's summertime,
it's
baby.
summertime,
This
train
is what we
time.
should be reading.
Yeah.
I hope we get a lot of like inside baseball on like how a train works.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I hate to burst your bubble, but I think it might be a subway train book, not like a train.
Subways? Oh my gosh, I miss the subway so much.
I think there's also time travel. I don't know. It sounds like a lot. I'll probably read it, but
I thought there was time travel. I'm not making that up. I thought there was something with the time travel in the subway and going like back in time on the train.
I think one of the ladies is displaced in time.
Yeah.
Ooh.
That's fun.
So
That's sexy. I like that.
Yeah. So it sounds like we're all reading the next book. So we like this one enough to be like, yeah, okay. Lesbians, trains, time travel. I'm here for it.
Yeah.
Well, I had a great time talking about Red, White, and Royal Blue with y'all.
Yay.
This was a lot of fun. And there were a lot of feelings. And, you know, low-key, I got a little angrier than I thought I was going to when we were talking about it. Like, I was plotting it out, and all my notes are kind of like, Ayani was annoyed by this. But then I got, like, mad. I don't know. But if folks want to find y'all outside of this little podcast microcosm that we've created, where can they find you? Where is Girls Like Us located?
So the best place to find us is either our Twitter or our Instagram. Conveniently enough, they have the same name. So we're at Girls Like Us Show on both Twitter and Instagram. There you'll find links to finding our episodes on any podcast service that you may use. You can find out whatever we're up to at the moment, whatever we're reading at the moment, whatever we're thinking about. And also we try to be really interactive with folks, specifically in our Instagram DMs. So if you ever have any questions for us or like suggestions, the Instagram DMs or our Google form are the best place to go. You can find our Google form at girlslikeus.show. That's our website. Check us out there. And then, yeah, any of our accounts, like you can always get into contact with us there and follow us. We make memes about like children's lit all the time. People usually like them, so that's kind of our main pursuit.
And if you want to find us, you can find Sex Love Lit at Sex Love Lit on both Instagram, Twitter, and also on Facebook, because we're old, so we got the Facebook page for that. And what are we doing next day, Ani?
Well, our June La Petite episode is going to be called Why Sex? So if you haven't noticed, our title has 3 words in it: sex, love, and literature. Oh my God. So what we're going to do is a series of short episodes where we kind of think of how each of those words make up our podcast. So the first one we're going to do is Why Sex, in which we'll think a little bit about what brought us to want to talk about sex in a podcast beyond, you know, being thirsty. So that'll be our June La Petite. And then for our July deep dive next month, we are going to be watching the tearjerker anime film, Your Name, also known as Kimi no Na wa, which I cried so many tears, I couldn't drive my car right away afterwards. I had to just like sit and weep for like 5 minutes.
Yeah, I've been there.
Yeah.
This is the anime film Ayani has decided to drag me into anime with, so I guess that will be fun for me.
It's been a fight. I've been trying to find other things, but like a lot of them are either like gory or whatever. Mm-hmm. And you know, I think this one will be fun for you, and hopefully you'll cry a little bit and then some emotive responses.
I'm sure I'll cry a lot. I cry a lot at a lot of things.
That's very fair. So yeah, I think this has been our episode of Sex Love Literature. Girls Like Us, thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us today.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
This was
amazing.
Yeah, this was fun. All right, until next time, we'll see y'all later.